Alrighty, this is ITS148. It's January 31st, and today we're going to start Chapter 6. So let me share my screen, and we are in ITS148, and so let me find Chapter 6 slides. Here they are. And I'm going to place these down in my thing here, right here. So we are still in review mode from last semester, although we get into it a little bit more deeply this semester. And so you recall we had a chapter on writing methods and event handlers or something similar. We're going to go over that today. We're going to learn a couple new things, and then I can introduce you to the next assignment. By the way, I did add a part 2 to yesterday's assignment, and it is basically, I want you to, when it says 2 quarters, I'd like you to, down below here or over here someplace, I'd like you to pop up 2 quarters for over here. This is the part 2. I added 5 points to the I added, there's a 15 point, it was 10, I made 15 points, so the first part can be 10 points, but then just 5 more points. And this is closer to, I gave an assignment in 128 last Tuesday also, and that one was harder than this one for you, so I thought I'd just throw this part in there. And so I went and found these great looking replicas of coins on the web here, cut them out and everything, and so it's very simple. And it may change how you do your code, but it doesn't have to. You can just add something down at the bottom and have it. I would have extend the screen out, extend the form out, or extend it down, and the most number of quarters you'll ever need is 3. And the most number of dimes you'll ever need, I suppose, is, I don't know, a 2 or 3, if you can figure that out. Most number of dimes you need, most number of nickels you need, most number of pennies you need to be 4. And so you can kind of put those over here, but make them all invisible, make them all, hide them, whatever the method is, hide them. And then, if there's 2 quarters, you enable the first 2. 1 dime, enable the first dime, 1 nickel, enable the first nickel, and so on. And I don't care if it's loop-de-loop, or you just, since it's a small number, you can just have some if statements in there if you want to, just to display it. So and that'll be a part 2. So part 1, if you've already done part 1, the one person has already done part 1 can leave part 1 there, and then just throw in this part 2 there and submit that. All right, and I will try not to give assignments and then extend them after I've put them up there, because because some of you like to do them right away, which is a good thing, of course. All right, so let's take a look at and I did add you may have noticed, I've added the next assignment, which is this simple calculator thing, and after today's lecture, this will be pretty easy. So you basically, it's making a form that looks like this, and you put in, an operand, you put in an operator, which is going to be plus, minus, multiplication, or division. Yes, I am free. And then you put in another operand, and you click calculate, and it gives you, and it does the result. So it's just very simple. You just have this, you just grab out operand 1 and operand 2, and then you got a switch statement, or an if then, if else, whatever statement to look at if it's a plus or a minus or an asterisk or a slash, and then you could probably have, if it's none of those, you can display up an error. You know, please put a valid operator, whatever. Click the calculate button and it puts the answer here. Very simple. You can imagine what the next, how I can add to this assignment. Okay, like maybe have buttons for each digit. Maybe have a decimal point button. We'll see. Last semester, I made the assignment where you actually had to do like an expression. You know, like 4 times 2, or 4 plus 2 times 7, or something like that, and you know, you had to deal with operator precedence, and I had to keep extending the assignment because it's too hard. And then I tried to write, and then I wrote it, and I got messed up, and I was showing anyway. So as we're not gonna try to be so fancy this semester. It's more important that you learn than I try to trick you or that kind of stuff. So, all right, so let's go over these slides. Pretty straightforward today. So we are going the objectives is, given the specifications for a method, you're going to write the method. Given the documentation for a method, including its signature, review, refresh our memories on what the signature is. Given the documentation for the method and its signature, write code to use the method. So that's all you need to know how to use the method. And then, given a portion of the code that can be converted into a method call, use refactoring to do the conversion. And I'm quite sure I showed you how to do that last semester, but we will remind ourselves how to do that again this semester. So there's a lot of review in this class. We'll be able to describe what the signature of a method is. We'll be able to explain the difference between passing an argument by value and passing an argument by reference. And we will describe how to use optional arguments. We'll describe also we'll describe passing arguments by name and the advantages of that. And we'll also describe the way event wiring works. And we didn't cover this last semester. It's just interesting to know. We are always going to wire events using the properties screen or the properties window, and you know, you click on the little lightning rod, and you select the method to attach to an event. I mean, that's how we're going to do it, but we sort of show you how that code affects the designer the designer.cs form, just for your knowledge. And, or if you're using Visual Studio on a Mac, you would have to do it that way. The basic syntax for coding a method is, and you already know this, but you maybe haven't seen it described this way. In fact, the way this description here, if in computer science we describe lots of things. This is describing the syntax. This is how we define syntax. This little this little, using the curly braces, and then this vertical line. This means that you will have one or the other. It'll either be public or private, and then the return type, the method name, and then there's a parameter list, and it's usually done with square brackets, and this can be a list, and then we have the bunch of statements. So for example, and the bracket means it's optional, or you can have one or more or none or more. And so here's an example of how you would define or declare a method that does not return anything. That's why we have void here. It doesn't return an integer, doesn't return a decimal, it doesn't return anything. It's like, right. And then there's no parameters. So for example, this is how you would disable some buttons maybe. And this is what a method looks like if we're defining a method with one parameter, a decimal, a parameter, and a method that returns a decimal value. So we have so it's a private method. By private, it means it's only code inside the class can see this method and use this method. If it were public, then code outside the class could see it and use it. Or no, could use it, could refer to it and use it. And this takes as a parameter a decimal number. So here's some code that does some stuff. And so if you actually have a return type, like here the return type is decimal, then you have to have a return statement someplace. And it has to be, a return statement always has to execute. So, you know, you can have return statements inside of things. And also when the return statement executes, then the method is done. So if you have return statement inside someplace, then the method is going to be done in the code, and it executes in the method. Then the code below that will not execute because it actually does the return. It quits and returns this in this example returns this discount percent value. Here's an example of a method that's got 3 parameters, and so and it returns a decimal value. So in this example, it's a method which calculates the future value, and it takes as input parameters. It takes a monthly investment amount in decimal. It takes a monthly interest rate in decimal. And then it takes an integer number of months. And we start out by declaring this internal variable called future value, set it equal to 0. And then we loop through the number of months. Each time we're taking the old future value, adding a monthly investment, taking that quantity, and multiplying it by the monthly interest rate plus 1. So it's future value plus monthly investment, whatever that number is, added to that, the future value plus the monthly investment times the interest rate. And then it returns this future value. Okay, so that's how you define a method. And this is how you call a method or how you use the method. You can put this optional keyword "this" in front of it. And later versions of Visual Studio, I think the "this" is optional. This means, you know, this class. I mean, you know, the class of the programming class, you know, in which the method is defined. And so this is how you use it. And when we are defining the method, we call it a parameter list. When we are using the method, we call it an argument list. So we pass arguments to a method, And the method takes those arguments as parameters and does something with them. So when you're using a method, they're called arguments. When you are defining a method, they're called parameters. So in this method we defined up here, which is disable the buttons, this is how we define the method. And over here is how we use it. And so this here, this is a statement. This is a, we have a method here which will get the discount percent. This is from a previous example. Takes as a param, it takes as an argument. Oh no, it sends the subtotal value as an argument to the get discount percent method. And the get discount percent method takes the subtotal as a parameter, does some calculations on it, multiplies by whatever, and then it returns it. There's a return value, and that gets written into this discount percent right here. Here's an example of a method, our calculate future value method, which we talked about earlier up here. Oh, this is get discount percent. Future value takes, there's 3 parameters, as you recall: monthly investment, monthly interest rate, and integer months. And in the when we are using it, they're called arguments. We pass a value in there for the amount that we're going to invest every month. We pass a value in there that's going to be the interest rate every month, and then we pass an integer number of months for how long we're going to do it for. Reviewing Intellisense here. Intellisense helps you. It knows exactly the context in which you're typing, and so it'll give you suggestions based on what you have entered already. And so in this case, when you've typed in this much, it knows you're probably going to enter in CA. It gives you all the choices for CA, in this case calculate future value. And over here it tells you, it actually tells you what the parameters of calculate future value should be, were defined as, and so that way you can know when you're entering in the correct arguments. And the order matters most of the time. So it says the first one is monthly, and that way you don't get mixed up or whatever. Very helpful. We can have optional parameters. I like that when my watch tells me to breathe. It's like I forgot to breathe. Oh gosh, I'm almost gonna die there. The optional there's optional parameters, and so they are useful if you know that most of the time an argument is going to be a particular value, like for example. Or if you just want to have a default in case they don't enter something in, or so when you have optional parameters, first of all you have to put them after the parameters that are not optional. You have to define them to go after the parameters that are not optional, and then you have to give a default value. So in this particular method definition, we are expecting a value for monthly investment. That's the amount of money you're going to invest every month. We're expecting that value. You have to give us that value. But if you don't give us a monthly interest rate, it'll assume as 5%. 5% monthly interest rate. That's a pretty monthly interest rate. 5%. That's a pretty high interest rate, isn't it? Oh no. Oh, wait, 5%. Is that like 60%? What's 0.05 times 12? That's 0.6, right? 60% interest. Ooh, that's good investment. So if you don't put in, if you don't put in, I mean, if when you call this method you only give one argument and not three, it'll take that argument as the monthly investment that you can invest every month, and then it's just going to use 0.05 as the interest rate for the month, and it's going to use 12. It's going to assume you want to do it for a year. And the way you use it, well, okay, here's how you use that method, assuming you're going to input, or you're going to pass as arguments all three values. You're going to pass a monthly investment as an argument, you're going to pass a monthly interest rate as an argument, and you're going to pass a number of months as an argument. If you want to assume 1 year, 12 months, as it's defined here, then you can leave off the months. You can just leave it off and do it like this, where here you've passed the monthly investment value and you've passed the monthly interest rate, but you're not passing as an argument the number of months, and so it's just going to assume 12. And you can pass parameters by name. As you'd guess, if you pass parameters by name, you just simply say the name. The first one is the name. This is very confusing here. The first, you say the name colon the argument. So this is confusing because the parameter name is the same as the variable that is used to contain the value. So you're going to pass in a monthly interest or monthly investment, and that's going to be this monthly investment value that's defined previously someplace. Same with months. So what's nice about passing parameters by name is that the order does not matter. So you can pass monthly investment first and months second, like you normally would. Oh, by the way, notice you're skipping the monthly percentage rate. And so that's how you can, if you want to like skip parameters in the middle, then you can use passing by name. And here you decide to pass them in the other order. Now this word here, this one has got to be the same as what you call it here. So here, internally you're calling the parameter, you're calling it this monthly investment. That has got to be the same as what you're using it. So if this were to be, if you were to instead call it, mon invest, for whatever reason, if you were to call it that instead of what we were calling it, then over here, you got to put this one as mon invest, And this here, you know, we see this up here. We're going to assume that someplace else, like up above, is something like decimal monthly investment. We're going to assume there's something like that up above it. So we're defining a variable called this. Let's call it monthly investment, just to be stupid. Okay, let's say we're doing that. Well, then this has got to be a monthly investment. So this is the argument, and this has got to be the same name as this here where we define it. You see. So a statement that passes one argument by position and one value by name. So this is if we're consistent with our example here, this is going to be monthly investment, and then this is going to be month. So, you know, because monthly investment, because mon invest was the first one, and we want this to be this value to be the amount that you're going to invest every month. This is $100 a month, and then the second one is passing by name. So we're skipping the interest rate in this example. All right. Now we're going to talk about refactoring and taking a chunk of code and making a method out of it. So lots of times what you'll do, I do this a lot, where you're writing a bunch of code, and you know you're writing this code, and you know you're going to use this code that you're going to write. You know you're going to want to use this exact same code someplace else, in other places. But at the time you're writing it for the first time, you want to just write it in there. You know, you're going to write it, you know, not as a method, but you're just going to write it as inline code. And so let's say you've written this whole button calculate click event handler, and inside here you got this calculation on to compute the future value, and it is exactly what is in yellow here. Or if you're colorblind, maybe it's gray. Shaded. These shaded 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines of code. And so you want to take that, you want to grab it, and you can use the refactoring feature of Visual Studio, and it boom, pops it into a method, sticks it outside, and it's ready there for you to type in a name for the method. And then once you're done, it's a method. It's a separate method. And then you can use this code, the separate method, in other places in the same class. So you do, looks like this. I don't need this. I want to get rid of this. So a method call that replaces the selected code. So up here we have the code right in line. Here we have created a method that does it. It's this thing here. This is a method that we create, and look inside. It's got this. That's the code that's this yellow code here. So this here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's exactly the same as this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Except for we've decided to enclose it in a in its own method. And it's going to be a private method. Static just means it's it means, well, never mind. We'll get to that later. And it returns a decimal value, and we're going to name it calculate future value. That's we're going to name it. It's a new name. We just made that up right now. Calculate future value, and then it's got to take parameters. This thing knows that this is not defined out. This is not defined in this code, so it's got to be a parameter. This is defined inside, so this is not a parameter. This one here has got to be defined outside. It's not defined inside, so it's got to be a parameter that comes in. And months is not defined inside here at all, so it's got to be a parameter that comes in. So it's smart enough to know, and it knows it's an integer. It knows, these are, so it knows that these have to be decimal values because this is a decimal value. So it automatically creates this and this based on the fact that this is a decimal value, and which means that this must be a decimal value, which means this must be a decimal value. This is an integer, so it must mean this is an integer. So it knows that to put decimal in decimal there. And all you need to do is, when you do this refactoring thing, this is going to be sitting there for you. And when it does it, it's going to say, new method or something. And you just got to type in what you decide you're going to name your method. And then once you've done that, it's going to stick this in place of this. That's not going to be there anymore. This shaded, yellow shaded code is not going to be there anymore. It's going to be replaced with this here. This is the yellow code that replaces it. So you do this by using the refactoring to create a new method. That's nice. So you select the code you want to create a new method from, press Control period, or you can do right click and select refactoring, and then select extract method from the quick actions menu that's displayed. I guess it's extract method that you select. This adds a method named new method to the class and replaces the selected code with a statement that calls the method. And it even pops up the rename dialog box for you to rename this thing new method. Rename new method. You probably don't want to call it new method. You probably want to call it something more descriptive of what it does. And then you click apply, and it applies the new name. Oops. The basic syntax of parameters in a parameter list. Okay, so you can have this optional, it's a parameter list, right? So you can either have nothing like this. This is the parameter. It's a decimal that's coming in. It's gonna and internally we're gonna call it this monthly investment. And then the next one is the decimal that's coming in, and internally we're gonna refer to it as monthly interest rate. And then another one is an integer. It's gonna be months. And then we decide that we're gonna have this fourth. We're gonna have this fourth parameter, and it's gonna be a decimal parameter, and it's gonna be called future value. However, in this case, we are going to call by reference instead of call by value. And what call by reference means is that if we are to change it, if internally we actually change it, then it gets changed on the outside too. This value here is obviously a variable of this is a variable. It might not be called future value, but it corresponds to a variable on the outside. And internally here, if we change this, then it's going to change it on the outside, whatever the position of whatever the position of the argument was on the outside. So here's the outside. Here's calling it. It's calculate future value. This is the first parameter, which we are calling by value. Called by value. We'll reinforce what that means in a moment. Called by value. Called by value. Just make this bigger here. This is a call by value, this is a call by value, this is a call by value, and this is a call by reference, okay? And this is this, okay? So when we're calling by reference, then that means that this can change because we're calling this by reference, and when we call by reference, that means that this method here can, this method can change this. And if the method does change this, then it ends up changing what it is out here. Not true with these, okay? It's not the same with these. This is a call by value. But that means that when this method is called, we are taking what the value of monthly investment is and putting that in there, okay? So internally, if you were to we're gonna probably have an assembly language course in the fall that I'm gonna teach. And in assembly language, we don't use these fancy labels and stuff. We actually write it how it is. And right here, that's an actual value. Whatever monthly investment was up here, it takes what that value is and it sticks that value there. So if it's like 100, there's gonna be a 100 there, okay? The interest rate, if the interest rate is 5% a month, then 0.05 goes there. Same with months. If the month is 12 months, 12 goes there. Not so with this. With this, it's going to be the memory address of this. Whatever the memory address of this is, which is, often memory, RAM memory someplace, it's a decimal, so it's 128 bits or whatever. The address of this goes here. And that way, if this method decides to change this, it's actually writing the new value into that address, which is this address. And so this value out here gets changed because this method actually wrote into the memory of future value. Not so here. This is just, the number 100. And the method can go ahead and mess with this, can mess with this all it wants. This method can change this to whatever it wants. It can change it to 1,000 down in here. But when it comes back out here again, this is still going to be 100. It's still going to be what it was out here. Same with this one. This method can go and mess with that value all it wants. This method can go in here and mess with this all it wants if it wants to. It doesn't matter out here. Whatever it was defined out here, it's going to keep that value. Okay, not so with this one. That's called by reference. Now with calling by reference, you're able to pass a value in, and you're able to get a new value back out again. That's reference. The third way to do it is out. Okay, with out you're not passing anything in. You're not passing anything in, but you are possibly getting something back out again. So you will recall with try parse, we use out. And so whatever this value was, here it's not defined as anything. But if we were to define this as something, and then we call this method, the method is not going to pay any attention to what we did outside. It's not, in fact, it cannot even know what the value is because we're using out, not ref. If we were to use ref, then it could. If we were to put ref here, then this value would actually get passed in, and the method could change it, and that changed value gets passed back out again. If we use out, it doesn't matter what it is defined outside here, but inside here it can change, it can assign it a value, and then when it comes back out again, it actually has that value. So in case you haven't figured this out yet, what we have done by adding this fourth parameter, whether it be this ref or this out, we are, instead of having a return statement like we have up here, we have, you know, this is just the 3 parameter one. Here we actually return this value out, and then the value of the method itself, you know, the method itself has a value. So later on out, so up here when we use it, we pass in these 3 arguments, and then when it's all done, this calculate future value actually has the return value. It actually has the future value that you want, and that's why you can take that value and assign it to this variable here. Whereas when we do it this way, it's, you see, there's no assignment. We aren't assigning it to anything. It's just this, and then if we want to display it out, we're able to use it like that. So now we're going to talk about how to assign event, how we connect the event handler, which is a method, how we connect that event handler to the actual object that has events that can be handled. And so in this particular slide here, we've got this future value form, and we have a text box here which we would enter the monthly investment. And because this text box is selected, we go down over here, and here's the properties window, and we click on this little lightning rod here, which switches this panel to event, to all the events that can be handled by a method. And this here, this happens kind of automatically. But so here for example, maybe we've defined the method already called clear future value. And so this is what connects this particular event to this method that will be invoked when the text is changed in the text box. So presumably what this method does, what this event handler does, is once you start typing something into this monthly investment text box, once you do that, it's going to clear this future value, you know, box down here if there was something in there. Here's how. So what actually happens is, in this example, when we double click on this thing, it's going to create a event handler that looks something like this. It's going to txt, if we name it txt investment. This is going to pop up this block of empty code, this method definition here. It's private, doesn't return anything. This is the name of it, and this is where you type in the code right here, right in between these 2 curly braces. And then over there in designer.cs, in the designer.cs file, this here gets automatically added. And basically what this here does is you are defining the event handler for the monthly investment text box, And it is the text changed event. So when the text changes in the monthly investment text box, this event handler called txt monthly investment underscore changed is executed. And it's this plus equals this new system event handler, blah, blah, blah. This is what connects or wires the event handler to the text box to be invoked when the text changes. So so actually what happens is when you double click on this, it's going to automatically add this, and it's automatically going to add this also. So now's a good time to, why don't I just pop open some sort of code here. Do I have any code? Let me go to, let me go to resources and see if I got any things here. Chapter, where are we? We're in chapter 5 already. I'm just going to go here, whatever this is a total monthly. I think this is the finished one, so I'm going to download this one on my desktop. I'm going to open it up. And I'm going to start it up. And while it's starting, so here it shows how, let's say we have defined, we have some event handler defined already. And so we don't, it's some code, is some method is defined already, and we've named it, let's say we've named it clear future value. And we want to make it so when this text changes, then this clear future value method executes. So in other words, we don't want to define a new event handler. We just want to use some method that we've already defined and have that be it. So over here, we can just, find the text changed, event in here, and then we can click this down arrow, and we can select any method here that we've already created. So that's what this does. Excuse me a moment. Hawaii.edu. So to wire an event to an existing event handler, you select the control in the form designer. That's clicking on it. And then if necessary, click the events button in the properties window to display the list of events for the control. So in other words, you gotta see, you could be over here on properties, but you wanna click that little lightning rod to get to the events. These are events here. And then you click to the right of the event you want to handle and display the drop-down list. So you click to the right of the event that you want to handle. So here, I want to handle text change. So I'm going to click over here, and this thing drops down, shows all my methods, and then I displays a drop-down list, and then I display the event handler that I want to use for the event. So over here, here's my thing I just started up. Let's start to see what this is. So here's this nice, this nice program here works great. And if we look at the, let's look at the form. So here's the form, and there may or may not be an event handler for if we enter something in here. Let's view the code. But while that's working, the code for, this is the code for the methods of the future, code for the methods in the future value application. Here we're just going over the code for the future value application. Monthly interest rate was yearly interest rate. Okay, in this code, we're actually treating that 0.05 as the yearly interest rate, which is what it should be. And then this divides it by 12 and then divides it by 100. This is how we call it. This is the designer. Okay, here's the designer code, which we've added the click event. So if we go back to here and we click on this text box and we look over here in the properties window, and let me click on this little lightning rod here, and we see there's no method over here for this. There's these methods here. If we let's click on this calculate button, and that would be the click. If we clicked on the calculate button, this is the event handler right here. BTN calculate click. If we view the code, that of course is this BTN calculate click. And if we actually go over into this designer.cs, which right here, see this form invoice total .designer.cs, we can look down and find, let's click this little plus sign here. Let's find the button. Let's find the calculate button, BTN calculate button. Where is it? What happened? Oh, here it is. Let's find the BTN calculate button. There's the label. Oh, BTN calculate. That's the button. This says it's a button. It's great. It's a nice button. And then we go down farther, and we find BTN calculate. Here's all the stuff for the BTN calculate. This is all the stuff. These are all the properties. So when you're messing around here, double clicking, going over here, messing with the properties, doing all that stuff, and this nice thing that Visual Studio has for you, what's really going on underneath is this thing is being built. This is code. This is C# code. And this thing is being created as you mess around with this thing. If you move this thing around, you go over here, and this is going to change. Wait, what is it? BTN calculate. This is going to change. Look, it says 179, 168. 179, 168. Well, guess what? I'm just going to go. Now let's go over here. And oh, it's not 179, 168 anymore. It's 131, 168. See, so this is the code the compiler sees. This is just some fancy stuff that Visual Studio provides for you, so you don't have to write this code. If you're using Visual Studio on a Mac, as I've said before, you do not have this form thing. You actually just have to write this code directly. So on a Mac, you know, you don't see this. What you do is you mess around with this thing. You know, I'm going to make it 101 or 101. I'm going to make it 101. I'll make it 188. And now I can, and then so here I'm on a Mac, and I go, oh, gee, now let's see, what does that do? Let's run it. oh my, that's not what I want. I better stop it again. And I'm going to put this up higher, 148. Oh, that's closer, you know, whatever. Okay, so that's what you're doing if you're on a Mac. But fortunately, we are using Windows, so we can just, yeah. Oh, look, it's got all these nice liney things there to make it help you line up. And we go over here, and that's better. So this is the name. This is the size, 75 by 25. We go like this. Ooh, let's make this bigger. 166 by 25. So this must be the width, and this must be the height. And it's got the tab index. It's got this, got the C, just hit the C. And this is what we've been talking about. This connects this event handler, btn calculate click, that would be btn calculate click, connects it to, says it's an event handler, connects it to the click event of the button calculate. So there you have it. What else is there? Some code, designer code. Here we go. This is the designer code I just shown you. This is our assignment. Create simple calculator. And this is the assignment I did not give you, which is adding a method to the income tax calculator. All right. So that's that. Done with the slides. It's 2:43. And so I think next time we'll open up this assignment and we'll start doing it. And I'll do like a couple of them and whatever, and you can finish it up. Are there any questions? All right, well, I will see you next Tuesday. Thanks for watching.